Hi, I'm Joy Vernon. I'm the organizer for the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup, and today we are doing the decanic imagery of Sagittarius. And in addition to looking at the traditional images that go with the three decans of Sagittarius, we'll be looking at the associated tarot cards, which are the 8, 9, and 10 of Wands.
And my name is John Allen. I'm the organizer for Denver Tarot Geeks. And we've been doing this series here for the past year right now. We've started with Capricorn way back in January, and now we're concluding with Sagittarius. Um, so, um, and we don't have any really big surprises in store other than, the actual programming of the images themselves.
So, without further ado, let's get started.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with our screen share. So our first decan is, of Sagittarius. Lord of Swiftness is in the Chaldean system, ruled by the planet Mercury. In a triplicity is ruled by Jupiter. Um, we have been concentrating mainly on the Chaldean order rulership planets, but we sometimes do pull in the triplicity rulerships when we see that there is, a certain connection with that planet in terms of the image that is described. With this decan, the first decan of Sagittarius is following Scorpio's mastery of the concept of the desire. Now one is freely able to move as directed by the will. The will becomes the subject of this particular decan, and actually the entire sign is definitely deals with the concept of will. And with this comes an emergence of a motivating vision, something like a purpose, a sense of purpose, or a goal that one really wants to achieve. And along with it, envisioning the appropriate vehicle for achieving that goal, whatever form that might take. With the natives that are born with this particular decan, show a bit of an affinity for influencing others, whether it's for good or ill. I believe Austin Coppock in his book, he describes this to this decan to the idea of a virus infecting something and infecting something with its ideas. In this fact, in fact, it's not particularly a great um, image to ponder, but the idea is pretty similar. For uses for this decan, you can use it for brainstorming, dissemination of ideas, propaganda, or even for sales ability. We'll go ahead and we'll show you our descriptions. Again, we'll show you our the six authors for each of these. Our first is Abraham or Ibn Ezra, a naked man from his head down to his navel. It is a figure of a man, and from the navel down, it is in the shape of a horse, and in his hand a bow and arrows, and he is shouting. Our next image is from the Picatrix. Three bodies of men, of which one is yellow, another white, but the third red. And this is a face of heat, weight, and fructifying in fields and on lands, of sustaining and dividing. Next, we have an image from Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. In the first face of the Sagittarius ascendeth the form of a man armed with a coat of mail and holding a naked sword in his hand. The operation of this is for boldness, malice, and liberty. And we have Leonardo Bruno's image. The first face of Sagittarius is a fully armored man holding a shield in his left hand and flourishing in his right hand a sword, before whom the ground shakes unceasingly. Our next image is from Aleister Crowley, a man with three bodies, one black, one red, one white. Finally, we have Austin Coppock's image of the poisoned arrow. Now we'll go ahead and consider our 6 images together. And then we are also going to scry an image in the center of the frame there as well. So we'll go in and take a few moments to do this. Okay, and we'll come back to our open discussion moment to talk about these images or anything that came to mind while we were doing our meditation.
Well, I have some things. I don't want to always be the one to start necessarily. If somebody has anything, I want to give a moment for them to speak up because we get some really interesting imagery that people see sometimes. Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. Yeah. The Agrippa one, right? Or just generally.
Well, I think too, when we were going over these images last week, you were commenting on at least the figures of the three men. In either case, it has kind of an alchemical significance because of the stages that it represents. I think there's the whitening stage, the reddening stage, and the blackening stage.
Yeah,
Not,
in
not, not,
alchemy, it goes from black to white to red, but sometimes there's a yellowing stage in between white and red.
Mhm. That makes me think a little of Aleister Crowley's version of the Temperance card art, which is definitely in reference to the art of alchemy and being able to refine oneself.
Well, I love that. And so these were the things that I was thinking this time through, because like John said last week, we prepared and in our prep sessions always have us kind of go through the slideshow and kind of talk through some of these things just to familiarize ourselves. But this time when I was reading just the words on the Crowley image, a man of three bodies, a man with three bodies. And that just made me think that the bodies were somehow connected. And then as I considered the colors, I could see like the black being the physical body, and then the other colors kind of emanating outward from it, like energetic bodies. And so the idea of transferring your awareness from the physical level to another level of an energetic awareness, um, of whatever sort for whatever reason, in my line of work and with my students, when we're doing that, it's mostly to connect with psychic energy and increase intuition and some things like that. But the other thing that I always think of with the first decan of Sagittarius in general, like specifically, but in Sagittarius generally, is the idea that the arrows are the first thing to fly in a battle. When you look at those old-fashioned battle type of scenarios. And so our very first centaur guy with the bow and arrow, and he's yelling something, and it's kind of like, let's go, shoot, fire, whatever. He might be yelling there. That could be like this. Everybody's excited. I think that's a lot of that Sagittarian energy is an energy of anticipation and excitement. And, all of the whole section of archers is ready to loose their arrows, and those are, those go really far and can be shot really accurately, and they can use a lot of damage. I used to play this online computer game back when I was in my 20s, and I'd like to build up my archers because my archers could take out all the other army without me having to actually get in there and fight. And so there's a lot of excitement when those arrows are released and you're starting to see that enemy fall before you even get close enough for hand-to-hand combat or to bother using your sword. And so and the first sword guy, the Agrippa one, looks like he's praying, and the other one says the ground is shaking before him. And so just this anticipation of I'm not close enough to the battle yet. I have to wait for it to be my turn to go forward, but I'm getting ready. And that tied into the three bodies of I am going to shift my energy maybe out of my physical body into my body of excitement or my body of adventure. Possibly, if you're a soldier, you need to shift into a body of rage or something that's very powerful, um, to keep your high level of awareness and to, do the job that you're assigned to do. Um, so those are all the thoughts that I had around this. I think it's really a really fascinating decan, and that's kind of how it all tied together for me. We
Well,
might
kind
go
of
through
what
this really fast today.
we'll make for an easy edit, I guess, in the video.
There you
But
go.
I do appreciate too. It's like we've have I think over the course of these series and looking at these images, there's at least one in every case where the traditional image of the sign emerges. And in this case here, you've got the centaur with the bow and arrow, which as it, I think that relates to more like the stories of Chiron, the wounded healer, as being, the tutor of many Greek heroes, and ironically was felled by his one of his own, Hercules, I think, or Heracles, I think, is what the one who accidentally shot him with one of his own poison arrows, which, um, and because he was immortal, he couldn't die. But there's that hybrid aspect of not just, the animal and human, but it's also the spiritual and the physical hybrid that is being pieced together rather carefully.
And we've got a comment. I was struck by how similar these meanings are, recurring themes of warriors and multiple personalities. Yeah, nice. And I was thinking with Austin's image of the poisoned arrow, I'm glad you reminded us that that's actually how Chiron, he didn't die again, but how he was wounded. Because I had forgotten that detail. I was thinking that the poison arrow was coming just as a handoff from Scorpio, that scorpionic energy, maybe because it's a scorpion, it does feel poisonous to me in certain ways. And so when Scorpio hands off to Sagittarius, we might end up with a Scorpio poison in a Sagittarian arrow. That's where I was going with it. So I really appreciate the background, John.
Sure. I think actually in terms of, the actual constellations, I think the arrow in Sagittarius, I think, is pointing to Antares, which is the heart of Scorpio.
Oh, nice. Interesting. Huh.
And I was trying to figure out, like, I think that does think relate to what I was saying earlier about Crotus. I think the one who was descendant from Pan and it was said to invent archery. And I think, I'm sure what the connection between that and Scorpio is, though. I'm not, I didn't really find too many myths about Scorpio other than he was sent to um, get in the way of Hercules, I think.
Hmm. There's so much to learn in that stuff. You can study and study and still come up empty on details of things.
All right, shall we go and compare our image to card?
Yeah.
So by process of elimination, um, we've gone with Ibn Ezra's image. Again, our classic Sagittarian icon. And we compare this with the Eight of Wands. And I think, one of the things I noticed with these images side by side, and I noticed much later actually that another fault of the AI was that the centaur's arrow or his bow is in two pieces, unfortunately. But one of the things I kind of associated was like, he is there and like in the forest giving this, shouting. He's like, again, it's like giving that kind of like that battle cry or that first uh, order to, release the volley of arrows. And then in the Eight of Wands, we have the arrows themselves, in the form of wands traveling to their destination as if that was like that far away first volley that kicks off the conflict.
Yeah, and in the comments we have that the Rider-Waite-Smith image is the outcome of the centaur image, which makes really good sense to me. I definitely, and I've always seen those Eight of Wands that way as kind of this coming in for a landing. The idea of arrows coming in definitely resonates in the Druidcraft deck. It's a guy practicing throwing spears or javelins or something. And so there's definitely that sense of something flying through the air and hitting a target or coming in for a landing. So I definitely like that interpretation. They really do match well for me.
You spoke about anticipation, and I think the Eight of Wands really represents that as well as the swiftness that's there. Because, well, I mean, Rider-Waite Smith, obviously, we've got this image, but with other decks, like you never know whether or not those are going towards something or from something until you really look at the image. So I think that that captures that anticipation you were talking about as well.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, and that's I love that Eight of Wands because, my my very first deck was the Barbara Walker deck, but the deck I ended up using the most was the Morgan Greer, which follows the Rider-Waite pretty closely. And then when I started working, I really started diversifying my decks, and I came upon the Robin Wood, and then later my Legacy of the Divine. And now we're talking like much later, but the Robin Wood and the Legacy of the Divine both show those wands blasting off into space. And so it's a very different feeling from this kind of gentle coming in for a landing thing that I usually saw. It's like this excitement in this launching. And I think both work pretty nicely, both the idea of like hitting a target or like where can we go? Where are we launching towards? It just kind of depends on just in terms of practice, it just depends on the person's question and as always, the other cards in the spread and things like that, which meaning kind of rises to the surface. I think trying to like putting Mercury in here and the first decan, the triplicity ruler. And I think you guys know this, but I don't think we've said it enough. When you're calculating the triplicity ruler, it starts with the sign that you're in. It imagines the three decans as being miniature versions of the three signs of that element. And so it starts with the sign that you're in. So the three decans of Sagittarius would start with Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, and then it would go around the zodiacal wheel, and the next fire sign would be Aries, which is ruled by Mars, and then the last fire sign when you're starting with Sagittarius then becomes Leo, ruled by the sun. So our decans would be Jupiter, Mars, Sun. And so we've got Mercury ruling it in the Chaldean style, which is the style the tarot uses via the Golden Dawn. And then the decanic images are going to be influenced by older philosophies. The Chaldean order is the oldest philosophy toward of the decans, but some of those other decan rulers, it wasn't the only philosophy. So there are other philosophies that creep in. Um, but yeah, either Jupiter or Mercury is what we get for this.
If I remember right, too, the Robin Wood card for Eight of Wands does have Jupiter in the background.
Yeah, I think it does. Because yeah, it's showing the planets going out towards those outer edges of the solar system, those wands going blasting out that way. So, and Mercury is considered swift. He's fast moving. He's able to go, to up to Olympus and to the world of people and down into the world of the dead. And so he can travel to these different environments and to these different realms and levels. And travel is a really good, I mean, Mercury rules travel on the one hand, and on the other hand, Sagittarius has a lot of travel symbolism that goes along with it. And so these things kind of, they connect really, really nicely. Um, and in a nice simple way that this is just the Lord of Swiftness. And it's pretty straightforward. It's one of the yeah, the card is one of the most simple illustrations, and the title is one of the most clear. And yep, this is what it means, and this is how it works. It's not too convoluted. And I think that's a lot of the energy that we have with this.
And there's no people involved.
Right,
Either.
right.
It's one of the, I think the only image in Rider-Waite-Smith of the small cards that doesn't feature a figure. So there's a bit of a level of abstraction to be reckoned with, which is perfect for Sagittarius because the Sagittarius is the higher mind. It's, philosophy, greater learning and whatnot.
Well, and there's something about Mercury and Sagittarius for me. Sagittarius, one of my favorite metaphors for Sagittarius, and I think I used the Robin Hood poaching scene maybe last month. I don't remember which month I used it. And now I've got the Robin Hood scene. I love the Errol Flynn film, and I read the Howard Pyle book several times too. So I'm never quite sure what I'm remembering, but I'm pretty sure this is from the Errol Flynn film when he has the archery contest, and and the his competitor, it's down to just Robin and one other person, and the competitor hits a bullseye, and Robin's like, move the target back. No, move it back further. And they move it back, and he pulls that bow and releases that arrow, and splits the previous arrow that was right at dead center. He splits it in half. And just that level of target, like shooting ability to hit a target so precisely, you have to have that eagle eye. It is, I mean, this is sharp shooting, this is sniper level shooting. That you have to have that eagle eye vision, that really clear eyesight at a long distance, and the power to send something precisely where you want it, not just like this. I like football things too. I don't know why. Now when you're throwing a football and you're kind of like, I'm not exactly sure where that's going to end up, and everybody's like trying to catch it or whatever. Maybe I just watch bad football teams. I don't know. But it's just like it's so precise and such precision there. And I think that that has a lot to do with Sagittarian and energies. And when we're talking about Mercury, the way Sagittarius thinks and the way Sagittarius communicates. Sagittarius is seeing clear to the target. And sometimes they skip a lot of the intermediate steps because they don't need to see all that. That sniper just needs to see the target. And so there's a clarity and a distance that comes, and definitely a speed that comes from this type of energy. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking there was one other card. I'm like, I'm sure there's
Yeah,
another card, and Emmy pointed it out. Three of Swords also, unless you count the
that's
heart as a
true.
figure.
Mm.
Yeah, I was like, I'm sure there's another card. So thank you, Emmy, for like solving the mystery for me.
Right, okay, so I guess we can move on to our next decan. There we go. So our second decan is the Lord of Great Strength, ruled by the moon in the Chaldean tradition. In this particular decan, it's we with the first decan you had the vision of the goal and the vision of the vehicle to achieve it. Now here's where the disparate elements be united here to achieve the goal. It's in part symbolized by that hybrid creature of the centaur, the half man, half horse. Uh, and So the vehicle is being built, and it's if you think of it in terms of the bow and the arrow symbolism, you have the uh, the bow is the body, and the or at least not the bow. I'm sorry, the arrow is the body, and then the bow is the spirit or the motivation that propels it forward. Um, And the challenge here is to keep the body and the mind both in line with the intention, despite any kind of opposition or contrary forces that may uh, be encountered. It represents a formula for strength in the great face of opposition and lends concentration and focus when strength and resilience are needed. So we'll go with our images now. Even Ezra's image, a beautiful woman with a lot of hair, wearing clothes and earrings in her ear, and in front of her is an open chest containing golden ornaments. Next, we have in the Picatrix a man leading cows, and in front of him, he has an ape and a bear. This is a face of fear, lamentations, grief, sadness, misery, and troubles. Agrippa's image. In the second face ascendeth a woman weeping and covered with clothes. The operation for this is for sadness and fear of his own body. Bruno's image. In the second face is a sad woman wearing mourning clothes, carrying a boy on one arm and leading another by the hand. Aleister Crowley's image, similar to Pecatrix, a man leading cows, and before him an ape and a bear. And now we have Austin Coppock's image is simply the bridle. And now we'll contemplate our six images together with an eye toward envisioning an image for ourselves. And coming back and we'll discuss.
Well, I had an interesting insight this time around, especially thinking of the cows and the bear and apes. And I'm on MM Moline's email list, and she sent something out this past week, but she included her image from the Telos Tarot, which I have, but I confess I hadn't looked up the cards for this sign. She included her image for this decan. And of course, and John, you had been talking about this even with our similar men. It was a man and a donkey, and there was like something ahead of him. It's like, is it ahead of him leading him, or is it ahead of him confronting him? And her image does have the bear and the ape facing the person leading the cows in a confrontational way. But the thing that really came through for me today, as I was thinking about it and trying to work with the moon energies and the Sagittarian energies, is that the moon, which represents home and it can represent the physical body, it does have a connotation of sadness, which we see in our morning images, or sometimes confusion. But the moon can be leading something away from civilization and into the wild when it's in Sagittarius. And so leading the cows, which represent civilization, into the wildness of the woods or the jungle or something where we might see a bear or an ape or something like that. Um, when I was writing my decanic posts a number of years ago, I did write the one for the moon in Sagittarius, which is the Nine of Wands. And I actually thought making a home away from home for moon and Sagittarius. And it made me think of uh, the story in the Iliad of the siege of Troy, where the Greek soldiers just basically set up camp for 10 years, like trying to fight the Trojans. And just that idea of that soldier that we saw in the first decan now just kind of setting up home somewhere foreign, not really a permanent home, but at the same time staying there a long time. I think that the idea of the fixed decan in a mutable sign is very much at odds, because that mutable sign does not want to settle. That it's those arrows all the time. It doesn't want to sit. It doesn't want to stay. And the moon really does like to kind of establish a base. And so, this idea of leading away from civilization and into the wilderness, I think became very relevant for me. And I think we can even see kind of a transition, which might be more of our mutable sign or Sagittarian energy of a transition into something that is more challenging or more sad, as we see in the mourning woman. The woman that's crying, and then the woman in mourning who it feels like she lost her husband, and now has to raise children on her own without, somebody to help and provide and in a time period when that was a lot more difficult. And so the other idea of going from, a maybe a kind of normalized scenario into a more, again, a transition, which is our Sagittarian word, into a moon situation, which is a more confused, sad, mourning. I do think mourning's a good word, type of situation. So those are some of the things I was thinking about.
And I was actually thinking to get again about the cows images and the person leading them. And again, too, that I'm glad you addressed that question about, with the animals being before the human, whether it's in a leading or in a confrontational context. I think in both cases, I think, what those animals symbolize are just, the true, the dual, or at least, that dual nature or the hybrid nature of the Sagittarians, and that those more fiery types of tendencies that may threaten to overtake them, or they may get a little too bogged down in the actual achievement of the goal rather than the actual logistics of working it out. And he's also in a position too where he's leading other animals. He's leading a herd of cows. That's the ability that the Sagittarian develops in that first decan, the ability to influence and to direct, and having that that fiery leadership quality there. And then you have that exploration aspect of it. Kind of like you're on the fringes of society now here. And again, these are ideas too. I think that they've cropped up before in some of the earlier magical images from some of the other signs. I can't offhand remember what, but there's a dynamic that crops up quite a bit there. And that image too, like even Ezra's image contrasting the sad women, and you have this, a woman who's obviously enjoying opulence and this, nice treasure trove.
I wanted to contribute, but I think this is like super strange. I once knew somebody, we were very close friends, and she was born in this decan. And seeing these images, I'm like, oh my God, like I see her life. Like,
Mm.
she had so much potential. She was like a brainiac, and we met at university, and she was a few years older than me, but she was always very melancholy. And I had other friends, and they would see this one friend that was born in this decan, and everyone was always trying to cheer her up. They were like, it was incredible because people felt really bad for her, but she wouldn't like take responsibility for like how she came across, or she's like, well, I don't care, it's how I am. And it's just kind of funny because Sagittarius energy is usually associated with light, some lightness, right? Like it's but also fiery and whatnot, that warrior bit. And she certainly had that. But there was this overall, like this melancholy, and she loved children. She had a great affinity for them. And I know that Sagittarius energy can come across as childlike. And also there is this kinship with animals. Um, so like it was like those were the only places where her like opulent self came out, but for all adults, it like all we saw was this person who, in spite of having a good job and a home and everything, she was just always forlorn, always alone. But she liked to be invited, but to not do the inviting. So I'm like blown away by these images because like it just they like jumped out at me and just reminded me so much of my experience with her. And when I was dating someone, she became scared that I wouldn't spend time with her. But I kept spending time with her. I understand that some people, when they get into a partnership, they kind of ignore their friends for a while, but I kept doing things with her. But again, she wouldn't invite me. I did all the inviting. So obviously this was a very imbalanced friendship. And eventually I did let it go because I felt the burden of responsibility for the adult relationship was on me. Which is funny because I have a Sagittarius moon and she was a Sagittarius sun. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to share.
Nice. That's a great story.
Are there any other observations or comments before we look at our card? Okay, we'll go ahead and move forward then. So again, we're going to be concentrating on even Ezra's image and compare that to our Nine of Wands.
I forgot we were doing Ibn Ezra. That's the one that I think we all kind of glossed over for the most part because it's like, what does this have to do with any of this?
Mm. Yeah,
The others,
Ezra, even
yeah,
Ezra's images seem to be more, at least farther away from our traditional images than the others are. They're a little harder to reconcile.
it gets
Um,
that kind of Taurus energy going.
What if, based on his description, though, she can't touch the chest? Like in the AI image, she's all in it. But what if it's beyond her reach? I could get some alignment in that scenario.
I love that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, in front of her is an open chest. It does not say that she has a golden chest or that she is sorting through an open chest. It says in front of her is an open chest. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That brings out that sense of potential, that sense of adventure, but and maybe the sense of reaching towards something. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then somebody else says, could the Rider-Waite-Smith be protecting the Ibn Ezra? And that's a nice way of thinking of it, definitely. Because it is hard to reconcile these. Definitely the idea of what is the Nine of Wands protecting, and I think that works with the idea of Sagittarius as philosophy and kind of your principles in a way. And so it's like, this guy's been beat up, he's injured, but he's holding, he's towing the line, holding his ground, standing guard. And it's like, why? What is he protecting? What are his principles? And so, yeah, maybe, something he's worked hard to achieve, protecting the people around him. Yeah, that's a really nice way of looking at it. I've got another comment over here. I see the wands in the background as resources, so that could be connected to the Ibn Ezra image, okay, that are there to support, but can it be acknowledged, accessed, and noticed? Interesting. Nice.
I've got a thought, but I think I want to save it until we actually look at all three of the cards together.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it probably was easier to illustrate it, I guess.
Nice teasing us,
Mm.
leading us towards the making sure we all hang around till the end. Brilliant, brilliant marketing, John. You said you weren't good at marketing. That's excellent marketing.
It's marketing by accident because that wasn't my intent.
Now that I've got a clearer, like a much nicer approach into this Ibn Ezra image, now I'm exploring this idea. She's got a lot of hair, which of course I always appreciate a lot of hair. I'm always trying to like mine's never the way I want it to be. So I'm like, ooh, a lot of hair, wearing clothes. It just says wearing clothes, so it's like, okay, that's good. But let's just assume maybe some nice clothes, earrings in her ear. She seems, those to me are kind of symbols of beauty, hair, clothes, earrings. Um, and so even ignoring the fact that Ibn Ezra dressed her kind of nicely and made that made her look more kind of rich uh, and elegant. Um, just now, this idea of the things that we have versus the things that we want is coming up. She already has a lot, but in front of her is this open chest. And now that I'm seeing it as maybe a little bit out of reach, it's like that is like, and what are the other baubles that I could get? Um, and maybe, I don't know, if we try to tie that into the card, the idea of, why is he still there if he's been injured and all of this? It could be because he's just super dedicated, or maybe it's because, he's really trying to get something. He's really trying to achieve something, which I haven't really thought of that card that way either. So now I'm kind of exploring this from a different point of view. Um, so just some thoughts.
There is the idea that Kopic discusses in that chapter in his book too, and it kind of talks about this through all three of the chapters from Sagittarius. It is oh, let's see if I can remember what I was going to think. Um, there is that. I mean, it's all about determination and will and drive and achievement. So. My take on that, at least, in terms of like, where this card lies is, where his situation is, he's worked hard to achieve all of this. He's now, making sure it stays there. Again, tying in with that, fixed aspect of this decan and immutable. He's trying to fix what is essentially volatile. And I think maybe I get a little bit of that same uh, symbolism with the chest of ornaments, with, that's the containment, and the ornaments aren't just, for display or as symbols of opulence, but, they're actual currency. There's something that can be used to buy or purchase with. Or maybe even transformed into something else. You can melt that gold down and it can become anything.
We've got a comment over here. The guy in the nine has definitely taken some knocks on his journey. So, whatever or why ever, there has been effort. Okay, nice. Makes sense with what John is saying. Yeah, good, good.
Okay, are we ready for our last decan?
Yeah,
Hmm. The last decan ever.
last decan ever of the
Hmm.
entire year. So sad.
And we have here, and the third decan is ruled by Saturn, known as the Lord of Oppression. And in this sequence of events that follow the decans in Sagittarius, we've got, the first decan has the envisioning of the goal and the vehicle. The second decan has the construction of the vehicle and its usage to propel one forward towards that goal. But here, it's the vehicle kind of outlives its purpose. It's like, almost like, the bow shoots the arrow. The arrow is now where it was intended to be, but the bow is left behind, um, in a sense. And it just, the vehicle needs to be sacrificed in order to achieve what is remaining of what is intended. So it means pushing the body a bit beyond its comfort zone in order to move forward. Here, I think, the was one of the goals of the decan is the perfection of the will. and subjugation of all to it. It's like taking that same, that energy from the first decan and it's really kind of building it to its utmost extreme in a way. And the decan's been used to do things that are done out of necessity for persevering through complete commitment despite difficulty, and basically just getting things done that need to be done. So with our next batch of images, Ibn Ezra gives us a man whose color and complexion is golden, and in his hand like a wooden earring, and he is covered by a door made of tree bark. Next is the Picatrix, a man with a cap on his head and killing another man. And this is a face of evil inclinations, of adverse and evil effects, and in swiftness and these same things, and in evil inclinations of hostility, dispersion, and of doing evilly. Evil, evil, evil. And I should say at this point that obviously AI generated imagery has some limitations on what levels of violence and nudity that can be said. So this image is a bit more suggestive than anything. Agrippa's image, a man like in color to gold, or an idle man playing with a staff. Our Bruno image, a man lying on the ground, waving a staff about wildly, with a pale face and filthy clothing. There is a pig beside him, rooting at a bale of hay. Aleister Crowley's image, a man leading another by his hair and slaying him. And lastly, we have Aston Kopic's image, a horse's skull. And now we contemplate our 6 images together, plus our scrying of another image. And we open it up to discussion.
I want to point out that this might be one of the decans that is influenced by both the triplicity as well as the Chaldean rulerships, because the triplicity rulership would be the sun. And so the golden guy in the first image, the Ibn Ezra image, as well as the golden guy in the Agrippa image, um, could very well be based on solar rulership for this decan. But the death imagery or killing imagery, as well as the skull, those are definitely very Saturnian. So we do have kind of, I mean, there's kind of a stark contrast between some of these images, but that could explain it. I think the most interesting thing is that usually Agrippa and Bruno are pretty tightly aligned, and this time going from a golden man holding a staff, or a golden man, or a man idly holding a staff, or whatever it was, to the man rolling around when a pig rooting at hay, a hay bale. I don't know. This hay is golden. I'm not sure. Straw is usually considered golden. That one kind of confuses me a bit.
It's almost as if, I mean, if I compare those two images with the common element being the staff, then you've got a solar influenced image on one hand and more Saturnian influence on the other.
Yeah,
With
that
that
makes
dirt
sense.
and filth and whatnot. Um, it's the staff, I guess. It's like, what does that symbolize? Maybe it's an aspect of that Sagittarian will again. And you've got that sense of idleness in, or at least, the idleness that's suggested in the first, in Agrippa's image. And there's definitely, it's not, it's more described more explicitly in Bruno's image of that idleness, where he's just kind of lying on the ground and he doesn't really care, basically. And so there's like that, I guess it's like, maybe just symbolizing a little bit of a danger of that kind of power that Sagittarius can wield and what kind of attitude one takes at the end of the sequence where this is mutable, and all that energy is being transformed into something different after this.
I love that. And the thing that comes to mind, especially with thinking of straw and gold, is the story of Rumpelstiltskin and the like, was it a farmer's daughter or miller's daughter, I think, who knew how to spin straw into gold. And I think she did it by she was blonde, she added a strand of her own hair to give it that kind of glinty, shiny quality. And Rumpelstiltskin demanded that she do that and was going to take her firstborn child or something if she didn't do it. And of course, there's always some kind of catch, and she could be freed if she knew his name, which she never told anybody. But of course, somebody somehow, or she comes upon him dancing and singing his own name. And so she's like, oh, well, my guess is that your name is Rumpelstiltskin. And he goes up in flame or smoke or something and gets sucked into the ground or some such thing, and she's free again. But I think a lot of the threat of death, the transformation of something lowly into something beautiful or useful even, I think a lot of those themes kind of come out in this decan. And with an ongoing expression of the alchemical imagery that is, associated with the Major Arcana card of Sagittarius, like John said, the Temperance card, or as Crowley calls it, art. Transformation of something lowly like straw into something fine like gold. Again, playing with both Saturn and the Sun and the kind of uh, changing from that Sagittarian ability to elevate or change or evolve something.
Hmm. I think actually probably one thing to point out as well is like this is a decan that's just before the the solstice. And usually there's like, again, like some major transition that happens in that final decan that, heralds the coming of a new season. Again, that it's like an extra mutable quality about that.
Well, and as before, Emmy and you are on the exact same wavelength because she literally posted that
Mm.
comment at the exact same time you were saying it. She says the change at the end of the annual cycle of the year. Yeah, so we have created the Sagittarian ideal of one mind unified.
There's something else I was thinking too. It's like, I think I was mentioning with Scorpio last time and how it's a fixed sign and there's um that kind of like, that sense of there being with the three decans, it starts off with a challenge. It comes with a success in this middle decan, and then there's another challenge afterwards. So it's a kind of like a down, up, down kind of configuration. And I think with this one, and I'm not sure if this is true of all mutable signs, but I think it probably varies from suit to suit. But there's a sense here where it's kind of like the arrow being released, and then there's that slow decay of gravity finally overcoming it, and it finally hits the ground or hits the target, or at least it is as farther you shoot, the more difficult it is to hit the target because you've got more force dragging it down. And again, too, that maybe that's something to see when we look at all three of the cards together.
Well, and I like that interpretation, and it makes good sense with our sequence going towards Saturn, which is the heaviest, symbolically the heaviest, weightiest planet. I want to point out that John and I discussed it, and we used an actual photograph of a horse's skull or a reproduction of a horse's skull for the last one. So that's not AI. AI was getting it so weird, and horses' skulls are kind of weird to begin with. Um, and AI was just making it really strange. And so we decided to use an actual photo there. And it's funny. And that's the thing. I mean, skeleton, it's so hidden. It gives the shape to things. But I mean, I rode horses for years. I took horseback riding lessons. And when you're putting the bridle on and you put the bit in the horse's mouth, I remember you had to hold the horse's mouth to get the bit past its teeth without hitting them and hurting them. And towards the back, that's the way I was always taught it towards the back of the mouth. But I see now, I'm trying to illustrate, I'm trying to mark it with my own cursor, which of course doesn't work. And now I see, I'm like, really? There was more teeth back there? I never looked any of my horses in the mouth, I guess. And I'm
Mm.
just like, oh. I thought, I got it past the main teeth, and then there was like, you know, uh, that was the end of it. But there's way more teeth back there, which I never looked any of my gift horses in the mouth, I guess. So it's really kind of fascinating to see the structure underneath something, you can know something really well and still not have any, and still not have the truth of what its most basic component is. And I think there's something to that Saturn and Sagittarius combination that kind of comes out here.
Mm. Okay, we can go ahead and look at our final image here of Ibn Ezra and compare that to our Ten of Wands, Lord of Oppression. I think with this image that AI generated of the Ibn Ezra um, image, it kind of, to me, it incorporates both those solar and Saturnian qualities about it. You've got that golden color of his skin, but yet he's covered by a door. He's being concealed by, and there's that sense of restriction there that Saturn kind of, lives up.
Yeah, and that I mean it resonates so much with the way that just very strange illustration for that Ten of Wands, which anybody that actually has to carry 10 wands would carry them on their back, but this guy has it arranged very awkwardly and in front of his head. So it's like he's created his own wall to walk into.
And Smith probably did that, for the sake of being able to, easily count how many wands are there. Because if they were stacked up on his back, they'd be all, bunched together and harder to discern. But there is that element of awkwardness. It's like, I think it was described as this decan was like the last mile of the marathon, where you're approaching the finish line, you're exhausted, but you're still, the end is in sight. So you just elect to keep going, no matter how difficult it might seem.
And we've got a comment over here. The burden of wands is a check on how far easily you can move, which does resonate with Saturn's restriction. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it is funny how different illustrations for the decan change that. Usually a lot of contemporary illustrations for the Ten of Wands do show the person carrying them on their back. But usually it feels weighty and heavy, and the person is bowed down, uh, and so there's a discomfort. But I do remember one deck that just had like a big, strong guy with the wands on his back, and he was just like moving along at a pretty good pace. And it's like, okay. If it's kind of, I guess the idea that comes from that is taking on too much responsibility, which I think is a Saturnian thing, and especially in that Sagittarian energy. Um, which is, Sagittarius is Jupiter ruled, so too much of anything. And so Saturn responsibility, taking on too much responsibility. I'm doing too many things. I'm taking on too many tasks and carrying too many loads. And if you've got the right balance, if you're, a big, strong, muscular type, and you can carry that many wands, then you have a more pleasant experience of your journey. But for people that have issues with Saturn, you tend to take on too much. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Or
One,
sometimes it's like it's like, the vision or the ambition gets so much that it kind of outpaces the person's abilities. So they're still willing to go for it, but they're at this point they're getting, they like way past not only their comfort zone, but their scope of skill. And that the Saturnian lessons start coming, in terms of like, being able to choose your ambitions more carefully.
Yeah, that makes really good sense. And I've got another comment over here. One of the discussions I have had a few times is whether he is dropping the stack. Yeah, for sure. If you look, he is trying to cradle, but there's no way he is journeying like that. I agree that the way his bottom hand is not holding those staffs securely. So I definitely agree with that statement.
Okay, well, in our final 10 minutes, we'll go ahead and look at our th three cards together along with the magical images. And in terms of the Rider-Waite-Smith cards, maybe I can go back to the thought I had earlier, was we have that sense of, in that first one is that opening volley. It's like, the arrows are being shot. It's like, I'm going to, it's like the Sagittarian is saying, I'm going to stake my claim wherever those arrows land. So shoots them off. Then they land. He goes to where they landed in the nine, and now he's out in the wild defending it, defending his keep, basically. Because in both cases, with both of those cards, it's, just barren scenery in the background. You've got a foundation that he's standing on in the nine, which probably maybe symbolizes the fact, okay, that this is where he's made that home away from home, as you mentioned before, with that lunar aspect. But then I think the 10 is like almost like conceding defeat. It's like you've already tried this and it's just become a little too much. And now he's packing it all up and he's walking back towards civilization. There's a little building in the corner there at the bottom. So he's walking toward that, away from the wilderness.
That's a really good summary of those three decans. And there might even be a different, like a kind of modified interpretation that the idea of I don't know. I guess it's pretty similar. I don't know if it's nuanced from what you're saying or not, if I'm just repeating things. It feels like somebody that is going on an adventure, but decides to doesn't it's not so much a giving up as it is, although I know that works well with Saturn, but kind of I've achieved what I can and now I'm coming back. It reminds me, I wrote a blog post earlier this year on the Aries decans and saying that the three Aries decans work well as the Joseph Campbell minimalist approach to the hero's journey, which is separation, initiation, and return. And so that's actually coming to mind again with these three decans,
Mm.
that he leaves, he achieves his goal through effort and overcoming adversity, and then he brings back what he's achieved back to the community to share it. And somebody over here says, which can lead to the Ten of Cups and leaving it behind. And then having over promised and under delivered, or the reach exceeds the grasp. Yeah. Yeah. With some of those Ten of Wands, I'm not I don't know. I guess I'm a fairly positive tarot reader. Um, I do appreciate negative. I think it's important to have cards in your deck that show bad outcomes and negative possibilities, but I also have kind of some positive interpretations for every card. And so for me, the Ten of Wands comes up when, and maybe and I might be misunderstanding, but the it seems to come up when somebody is ready to take on more responsibility. Um, and, depending on their situation and their story, maybe it does come up to just say, no, no way, this is too much work. But I think under certain circumstances and with a certain array of cards, it can be like if you're willing to do the work, you can win the prize, you can achieve the goal.
And also like an object lesson in picking your battles,
Yeah.
or making sure that your goal is achievable. I mean, it's easy sometimes in the Sagittarian paradigm to really like get some very lofty ideas and just, it's like, basically just trying to find out what's over the horizon all the time without necessarily, appreciating where you are. But there is that, Jupiterian influence overall for Sagittarius, being that is its planetary ruler. So we look at these, it's helpful to look at all of these decans within that lens. It's like first you're looking through the Jupiterian lens, and now underneath that you've got um, your mercurial one, your lunar, and your Saturnian as middle managers. Hmm.
I remember I have a astro limerick about the moon and Sagittarius. I'm trying to find it.
While you're looking for that, we got another chat comment. That last comment works with the last Ibn Ezra, breaking through the wall to see what's next. In terms of like those three images, two of the decanic images, the sequence I see is step one, let's go get the treasure. Step two, we've got the treasure. And step three, we become the treasure.
Oh, I found it. Huh, I can't believe I found it. So, what I had for the moon and Sagittarius was the moon likes her home, but Sag leaves it behind. So, jump in the camper and see what we find. A wilderness bed, stars nod overhead. Being alone never felt so entwined. That was one of my favorite ones. I think we're done and done on time. Woohoo! Sagittarius, go.
Hey, all right.
Any last thoughts, anybody?
I just want to say thank you for this. This has been a really interesting journey this past year, and I've learned an awful lot. So I just wanted to say thank you for all of this work you guys did.
Oh yeah,
You're
absolutely.
welcome.
I love doing this. Our pleasure. And Monica also says thanks to both of you for doing these. These have been interesting for sure. Where do the limericks come from? Did Joy write it? Yes. I was in 2020, my contribution to the COVID melee was to write lunchtime astro limericks to perk people up and to as something fun to do and to explore the transits of the day. And so that particular limerick was from Friday, May 8th, 2020. I did it for about 2 months. So And the that's my you can find them on my Instagram. I don't post very much, so they're not that hard to find if you scroll back. But the hashtag I was using was lunchtime astro limerick, one word.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, every one of you, especially those of you who stuck with it for the duration. We always like
Yeah.
to see that. We like to see people who are dedicated in the long haul, just like a
Yes.
Sagittarian.
Yes. Very much love it. Love it. Those are my people. Committed.
Happy solstice and happy new year to everybody.
Yeah, thanks you
Thank you,
too,
Abby.
Denise.
Same to you.